Police officers handcuffed a Navy sniper, then a 4-star general entered the courtroom to apologize. The handcuffs clicked around Sarah Mitchell's wrists with unnecessary force, the cold metal contrasting with the heat of humiliation that washed over her face. At 34, she never imagined that a simple misunderstanding in a parking lot would land her in a police station like a common criminal. "This one's dangerous, Sergeant," Officer Johnson muttered to his colleague, tightening the handcuffs deliberately. "Look at the way she's staring at us. Crazy veteran, I bet." Sarah remained silent, her green eyes fixed on the wall in front of her. During 15 years of service in the Navy, she had learned that certain battles were not worth the energy. But something deep inside her burned, a mixture of indignation and a strange calm that only people who have faced much worse can maintain. The incident had begun absurdly. Sarah was leaving the supermarket when she saw two men forcing an elderly woman to hand over her purse. Her reaction was instinctive. She approached calmly, neutralized the situation without violence, and the thieves ran away. When the police arrived, the same criminal she had scared off pointed her out as an accomplice. "It's her, officer. She was with us," one of them shouted, desperate to divert attention. "This woman is dangerous." And now there she was, handcuffed like a criminal, while the real culprits had been released after inconsistencies in their statements. "Full name?" asked the officer at the front desk, not even deigning to look up. "Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell." "Occupation?" "Auto mechanic." She chose not to mention her 15 years of military service. Experience had taught her that certain information only brought more trouble in situations like this. Deputy Adams entered the room with the arrogance typical of someone who had never questioned his own power. "So you're the heroine who wanted to play the savior, huh?" His tone was heavy with sarcasm. "Let me guess, traumatized veteran who thinks she's still at war?" Sarah took a deep breath. There was something about the way he spoke, an excessive confidence, that told her this man was used to humiliating people he considered inferior. "I was just trying to help an elderly woman, sir." Sure. "And I suppose you have special training too, right? You all say that." Adams laughed, leafing through a file. "Vehicle maintenance. Interesting career for a heroine." What Deputy Adams didn't know was that Sarah Mitchell wasn't just an ordinary mechanic. During her years in the Navy, she had been one of the most lethal snipers of her generation, saving dozens of lives on classified missions in the Middle East. Her hands, now dirty with engine grease, had once held a rifle with surgical precision from over 1,000 meters away. But Sarah had learned long ago that some secrets need to remain buried until the right moment. "Well," Adams continued, "you're going to stay here until we figure out exactly what happened. And between you and me, lady, things aren't looking too good for you." As she was led to her cell, Sarah noticed something that went unnoticed by the officers. On the sheriff's desk was a photo of him greeting local politicians, and behind them was a banner with the name Morrison and Associates Construction, the same company that had mysteriously fired 3 veteran mechanics the previous month, all due to budget cuts. Sarah smiled almost imperceptibly. In 15 years of military service, she had learned that coincidences were rarely just coincidences. And now, sitting in that damp cell, she was beginning to connect dots that would form a picture much bigger than a simple misunderstanding. What Detective Adams and his colleagues didn't realize was that the woman they had just handcuffed had spent years gathering information and building connections that extended far beyond that police station. More importantly, she never entered a battle without being absolutely sure she could win it. If you're enjoying this story of courage and determination, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what's about to happen will show you that underestimating the wrong person can be the biggest mistake of your life. The cold cell didn't intimidate Sarah. During missions in Iraq, she had slept in makeshift bunkers under constant bombardment. The smell of mold and the noise of drunks in the cell next door were practically a spa compared to the conditions she had already faced. But her mind didn't rest. While the other prisoners snored, Sarah processed every detail of the latest events. The photo from Morrison Construction, the mysterious dismissal of the veterans, the way the criminals had been quickly released, it all formed a pattern that her military experience recognized immediately. The next morning, a surprise awaited her. "Mitchell, you have a visitor," announced the guard, clearly annoyed at having to work on Saturday. In the visiting room, Sarah found Marcus Chun, a middle-aged Asian man wearing a simple but well-cut suit. His alert eyes and upright posture betrayed his military past. "Sergeant Chun, retired Marine Corps," he introduced himself quietly. "Lawyer now." I heard about your case through the Veterans Network. Some things don't add up. Sarah studied the man in front of her. How did you know I served? Your posture when they brought you in yesterday. I recognize a warrior when I see one. Marcus opened a folder. Besides, I made a few calls. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, 15 years in the Navy, 3 overseas deployments, specialized in special operations. Interesting how that didn't show up in your police record. I'd rather not mention my service. It just brings trouble. Marcus nodded understandingly. I understand. But maybe it's time to change that strategy. I found out some things about Sheriff Adams that you need to know. As Marcus spoke, Sarah learned that Adams had a suspicious financial relationship with several local businesses, including Morrison Construction. Over the past 2 years, at least 6 veterans have been arrested under questionable circumstances after losing their jobs or getting into disputes with businessmen connected to Adams. It's a system, Marcus explained. Veterans are easy targets. Society already has preconceived notions, especially if you're a woman. Adams takes advantage of that to do favors for his business friends. Later, back in her cell, Sarah received another unexpected visitor. The elderly woman she had helped in the parking lot appeared accompanied by her 2 daughters. Honey, my name is Eleanor Washington, said the old woman, her eyes brimming with tears. I came to thank you and to tell you that I know exactly what happened yesterday. You saved me from those thugs. Mrs. Washington, you don't need to get involved in this. Nonsense. At 78 years old, I've seen too much injustice to keep quiet. Eleanor leaned closer. Besides, one of my daughters works at City Hall. We know exactly who Deputy Adams is and what kind of business he's in. Eleanor discreetly slid a piece of paper across the table. Phone numbers of people who can help. And one important thing, those 2 thugs? They've been arrested before. Adams always lets them go quickly in exchange for favors. That night, Sarah used her one allowed phone call not to call her family, but to a number she had memorized years ago. The voice that answered was familiar and authoritative. General Patricia Hayes. General, this is former Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, Operation Silent Strike. There was a long pause. Sarah? My God, where have you been? I've been trying to find you since you left the service. It's a long story, ma'am. But now I need a small favor. As Sarah explained her situation, she could hear the indignation growing in the general's voice. Patricia Hayes was one of the most powerful women in the U.S. military, and Sarah had saved her life during an ambush in Afghanistan. Deputy Adams has no idea who he's dealing with, the general said coldly. Sarah, do you have any evidence of these irregularities? Not yet, but I'm working on it. Then work fast. And Sarah? You have all the support you need. It's time some civilians learned that veterans aren't easy victims. The next day, Adams showed up at the station visibly upset. A mysterious call from the Pentagon had questioned the treatment of a person of military interest, but without specifying who. Mitchell, he shouted during the interrogation. What kind of game are you playing? Who do you know? Sarah kept her expression neutral. I don't know what you're talking about, Chief. Don't play dumb. Someone very important is asking questions about you. Inside, Sarah smiled. General Hayes had activated his contacts, but subtly. Adams was nervous, but he didn't yet know exactly why. Perhaps, Sarah said calmly, you should have done your homework before arresting me. Sometimes appearances can be deceiving. Adams slammed his fist on the table. You're staying here until I find out the whole truth. And when I do, I'll make sure you pay for every problem you've caused me. But Deputy Adams had no idea that Sarah had spent years infiltrating terrorist cells, gathering information while pretending to be vulnerable. She knew exactly how to make an opponent underestimate her until the perfect moment to reveal her true cards. That night, while Adams thought he had the situation under control, Sarah was mentally finalizing the first phase of her operation. She had identified allies, mapped out the enemy's weaknesses, and established communication with higher command. It was when Adams entered the cell with a cruel smile that Sarah realized he had decided to escalate the situation. But what the detective didn't know was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his career, giving the Navy's most experienced former sniper exactly the motivation she needed to turn defense into all-out attack. Only one question remained: Would Adams realize the danger before it was too late, or would he continue to underestimate the woman who had survived wars he couldn't even imagine? The following Monday, Adams arrived at the police station with renewed confidence. He had decided to speed up the case against Sarah by inventing new charges to keep her in jail longer. After all, who would care about a mechanic with no influential family or expensive lawyers? "Johnson, prepare the paperwork to transfer Mitchell to the state penitentiary," he ordered, slamming his office door. "I'll add resisting arrest and threatening an officer." But at 10:47 a.m., something changed dramatically. 3 black official cars pulled up in front of the police station, followed by an Army communications van. Adams watched through the window, confused, as men and women in military uniforms got out of the vehicles. The first to enter was General Patricia Hayes herself, an imposing 52-year-old woman with 4 stars on her shoulders and a posture that commanded instant respect. Behind her were 2 colonels and a Pentagon press officer. "Where is Sheriff Adams?" the general asked the receptionist, who stood completely frozen. Adams appeared quickly, trying to hide his nervousness. "I'm Deputy Adams. How can I help you?" "General Patricia Hayes, United States Army Central Command. I'm here to pick up Sergeant Major Sarah Mitchell." "Sergeant Major?" Adams stammered. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake. The woman we have here is just a mechanic." The general cut him off with a cold stare. "Staff Sergeant Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, Medal of Honor for Valor in Combat, Silver Star, Purple Heart, and a 15-year veteran of the United States Navy, including 3 deployments in classified special operations." Adams felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "Medal of Honor. She saved my life and the lives of 32 other soldiers during an ambush in Afghanistan," the general continued, her voice echoing through the station. "She is considered one of the most lethal snipers in American military history. And you, Deputy, arrested her for helping an elderly woman." At that moment, Marcus Chin entered the station accompanied by Eleanor Washington and her daughters, as well as a local television reporter who had been discreetly alerted to the situation. "Oh, and Sheriff Adams," Marcus said with a smile, "I hope you enjoyed the calls from the Pentagon." That was General Hayes herself asking a few questions about the treatment of her savior. Adams tried to recover. "Look, we didn't know. She didn't say anything about being in the military." "Why should she have?" The general approached him. "Veterans like Sergeant Mitchell have learned that civilians often view our service as a sign of instability, not honor. Especially female veterans." That's when Eleanor Washington spoke up. "Sheriff, I need to tell you something. I recorded the entire conversation we had about how you solve problems for businessmen in town. My daughter works at City Hall, remember? We've known about your favors for years." The colonel standing next to the general handed Adams a folder. "These are copies of the documents that were sent to the State Internal Affairs Division, the FBI, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, including records of calls between you and executives at Morrison Construction, as well as suspicious patterns in the arrests of veterans over the past 2 years." Adams opened the folder with trembling hands. There were bank statements showing suspicious deposits, transcripts of phone calls, and a complete list of all veterans who had been unjustly persecuted in his jurisdiction. "How did you get this?" Adams whispered, pale. Sarah finally appeared, escorted by a police officer, but now everyone in the station looked at her with reverential respect. "Sheriff Adams, when you underestimate someone based on prejudice, you never really know who you're dealing with." The general addressed Sarah with genuine emotion. "Sergeant Mitchell, on behalf of the United States Army, I apologize deeply for the way you were treated. This is a direct affront to everyone who has served this country with honor." "Thank you, General. But I believe it is Sheriff Adams who owes an apology, not to me, but to all the veterans he has wronged out of personal greed." Marcus Chun approached Adams with legal documents. Sheriff, I've also taken the liberty of suing you for unlawful arrest, defamation, and violation of Sergeant Mitchell's civil rights. The initial amount is $3 million. Adams tried one last desperate gambit. "Look, this was all a misunderstanding. I was just doing my job." "His job?" Eleanor Washington laughed bitterly. "Son, I'm 78 years old, and I've seen a lot of corrupt sheriffs in my life. You weren't just incompetent, you were deliberately malicious." The reporter approached with cameras rolling. "Sheriff Adams, Any comment on the allegations that you took payments to go after veterans? That's when Adams realized it wasn't just his career that was over. The cameras were rolling, his wife was probably watching at home, and everyone in town would find out that the man they had sworn to protect and serve had been selling injustice to the highest bidder. No. That's not how it happened, Adams muttered, but his voice was weak and defeated. Sarah maintained her dignity until the end. General Hayes, I don't need revenge. The truth was enough. I just hope this stops other veterans from going through what I went through. As the handcuffs that had once bound Sarah now clicked around Adams' wrists, one question remained. Would the transformation of America's most lethal former sniper into a symbol of justice be the catalyst for even greater changes in the system that had for so long protected corrupt men like Adams? 6 months later, Sarah Mitchell stood on the main stage at the National Veterans Convention, receiving a standing ovation from more than 5,000 former military personnel from across the country. The Civil Courage Award in her hands shone as brightly as the smile on her face. When they handcuffed me that day, she said into the microphone, her clear voice echoing through the auditorium, I thought I was facing just a corrupt deputy. I had no idea I was about to expose an entire system of persecution against veterans. The federal investigation that followed Sarah's case had resulted in the arrest of 12 people, including 3 businessmen who had paid kickbacks to Adams. Morrison Construction had filed for bankruptcy after losing million-dollar contracts when its illegal practices came to light. More than 40 veterans received compensation totaling $23 million. Marcus Chun, now a partner in his own law firm specializing in veterans' rights, watched proudly from the front row. His firm had grown from a small office to a national firm with 17 lawyers, all dedicated to cases of injustice against former military personnel. Sarah turned her personal injustice into collective justice, he had told reporters. She didn't just get revenge, she changed the system forever. Meanwhile, former Sheriff Adams was serving his 8-year sentence for corruption, extortion, and civil rights violations at the Indiana State Penitentiary. His fall had been complete and brutal. His wife had filed for divorce after discovering that text messages between Adams and the businessmen included cruel jokes about useless veterans and plans to clean the city of this scum. His children changed their last name and cut off all contact. The house he had bought with dirty money was auctioned off to pay compensation to the victims. In prison, Adams discovered firsthand what it was like to be treated like a common criminal. Do you know who put me here? He asked his cellmate on his first day, a Vietnam veteran convicted of drug trafficking. A mechanic. A simple mechanic. His cellmate laughed bitterly. Brother, you arrested a decorated Navy sniper and you still have the nerve to call her simple? You don't understand anything. What Adams would never understand was that Sarah had never been just a mechanic. She had chosen that humble profession after her military service precisely to fly under the radar, to live in peace away from the spotlight. But when forced to fight, she revealed herself to be exactly what she had always been, a strategic warrior with connections that extended to the highest echelons of government. Eleanor Washington, now 79, had become a tireless activist for veterans' rights and a national spokesperson against police corruption. Her foundation, Courage to Speak, had already helped more than 200 veterans obtain justice in similar cases. That girl saved me twice, she said in interviews. First from the thieves, then she saved all of us from that rotten system. But most importantly, she taught me that age is no excuse for remaining silent in the face of injustice. The police station where Sarah had been arrested underwent a complete overhaul, with 3 officers fired and a new chief, also a veteran, installing a sign at the entrance, "We serve with honor," a constant reminder that those who protect the country deserve protection, not persecution. The new protocol required mandatory military background checks before arresting any veteran suspect. General Hayes visited Sarah regularly, no longer as superior and subordinate, but as friends bonded by their military service. During their conversations, the general often marveled at Sarah's transformation. "Do you know what your biggest victory was?" the general asked during a lunch at Sarah's workshop. It wasn't destroying Adams. It was showing that veterans aren't victims. We're survivors who build empires when we're underestimated. Sarah smiled, looking out the window of the workshop she now owned, a 3-building complex that employed only vulnerable veterans. What had started as a small auto repair shop had evolved into a vocational rehabilitation center offering technical courses, counseling, and job opportunities. Mitchell Veterans Enterprises was now a $2 million a year business with a waiting list of companies wanting to hire its graduates. Sarah's story had inspired legislative changes in all 50 U.S. states, creating specific protections for veterans in the criminal justice system. Her name was being considered for a Senate run, but she preferred hands-on work, building something tangible that could touch real lives. "Politicians make laws," she explained. "I prefer to change lives one at a time." What few knew was that Sarah had meticulously documented every irregularity she had observed over years of working various jobs. Her small drawer at home contained evidence of discrimination at 12 different companies, notes on patterns of police corruption, and a network of contacts that included investigative journalists, progressive lawyers, and veterans in key government positions. Adams had attacked not just one person, but an entire intelligence network built over decades. Marcus Chun often joked that Sarah had applied military tactics to civilian life with surgical precision. She identified the target, gathered intelligence, executed the mission, and protected innocent civilians. Perfect operation, zero casualties on our side, complete neutralization of the enemy. During the award ceremony, when asked what advice she would give to other veterans facing injustice, Sarah was blunt: "Don't seek revenge. Seek justice. The difference is that revenge satisfies only you, but justice protects those who come after you. And remember, anyone who underestimates a veteran out of prejudice has no idea of the level of discipline, strategy, and connections they are challenging." Adams, watching the award ceremony on television in the prison cafeteria, finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He hadn't underestimated just one person. He had underestimated an entire code of honor, a brotherhood forged in combat, and a network of loyalty he would never understand. His fatal mistake was believing that a uniform determined a person's worth. Sarah's workshop now employed 43 veterans, offering not just jobs, but a second chance to those whom society had often forgotten. On the wall, a photo of her with General Hayes standing side by side with his Medal of Honor for valor in combat reminded everyone that heroes are not defined by where they were born or what uniform they wore, but by how they choose to act when tested by adversity. "Think about that," Sarah concluded her speech. "When someone tries to tear you down because of prejudice, remember, they don't know your whole story. And sometimes, the best education we can give is to simply be exactly who we are, build something bigger than they could ever imagine, and prove that true strength isn't in destroying enemies, but in creating a legacy that renders them irrelevant." The auditorium erupted in applause as Sarah waved, not as a victim who had survived, but as a leader who had turned injustice into inspiration, proving that when you try to take down someone who has already survived war, you may find that you have just declared a battle you can never win. If this story of transformation and overcoming adversity touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories of people who turned their greatest injustices into the most extraordinary victories. Because sometimes the real heroes are those whom society least expects, but who possess the silent strength to rewrite the rules of the game.